For those of you who prefer my core historical content, the regular videos that I usually post on my channel, as opposed to the debunking videos or react content, then, well, first of all, thank you so much for clicking this one and still supporting me, but I created a playlist for you. So if you click playlist, I made this playlist called Core Historical Videos the algorithm doesn't notify you about. These are mostly for the last 3 months, as notification bell is broken, so click the link in the description or the pinned comment, you'll have access to these so that you don't have to rely on the freaking algorithm muppet. The list, of course, will keep getting updated. Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and a few of you have asked me to check out the channel Oversimplified together. And here it is, they even have the same color shade as NordVPN, will you look at that. So 8.9 million subscribers, only 33 videos? Holy mother, when did they open the channel? 2006. Man, they make like a video a year. So still active, appreciate that. 29 million, my gosh, the views. Good for them. Must take quite a while to create the videos. Anyways, they've got a playlist, which I thought was convenient, and I wanted to start with the First Punic War, so let's see how it goes.
Introducing our new, glorious, breathtaking...
Look at those torches, I love the animation, even the light.
Bucket plushie, limited quantity, available now, along with some Punic War character pins. Buy them.
Yeah, I like the Lorica Hamata, look at that, it's pretty nice.
Or I'll marry your mother. It's your choice.
Oh, Marcellus, you sure have a lot of dignitas. Kiss me.
Okay.
Shout out to Senatus Populusque Romanus. Rome, sweet Rome. Rome, sweet Rome. I am so gonna do that. I'm so gonna print it.
Hey, Dad. Hi, son. Just reading the newspaper. What can I do for you? Well, you know how you always say Rome is the greatest...
I love that he's wearing a historically accurate bulla, but this is the kind of jewelry that would signify a child who is a citizen.
...civilization in the world? It bloody well is. Well, I was just wondering, what makes us so great? How did we come to be? Wow. My son. Boy, let me take you on a journey.
If he had a daughter, she would have had the lunula, which is the half moon.
To this side of the room. The story of Rome begins with these...
Wait, what did it say there? Warning, tales contained within the slideshow presentation may be partially or entirely mythical.
These beautiful baby boys going to town on some she-wolf mommy milkers. That's gross. You're gross! Sorry, son. You're not gross. I love you. They're called Romulus and Remus, and when they grew up, in 753 BC, they founded
Points because they said BC.
Rome. But there was just one problem. They couldn't agree on which of them should be the king. But they worked it out peacefully, right? Oh, heavens no. Romulus caved Remus's skull in with a shovel. Here's a picture. Our first king committed fratricide? I know. Look at his face. When's the part where we become the greatest civilization, Dad?
Oh, this is good. I see why they get so the views. I mean, this is good.
Well, you see, at first Rome was full of men. I'm talking like a real sausage party. You know what I mean? Yes, sir. So we invited some neighboring cities over for a big feast.
I hate those helmets. I know that I'm not pointing anything, like it's just for fun. But those helmets are terrible.
Cities over for a big feast. And then we literally kidnapped all of their women. Here's a picture. Look at that one. She's like... This is messed up. You're messed up. Sorry. I'll be a better father. I promise. Yes. So then, finally...
Pater familia.
After centuries of monarchy, those tyrannical kings started getting a little too big for their britches. So we overthrew the kings and established Rome as a republic. Is that when all the killing stopped? Oh, heavens no. That's when the killing surged, baby. We went wild and conquered the Latin League, the Samnites, the Etruscans. Woo! What a rush. Dad, Rome seems...
Who did they... Wait. Let me double check that. Who are the people again?
Better father. I promise. So then, finally... After centuries of monarchy, those tyrannical kings started getting a little too big for their britches. So we overthrew the kings and established Rome as a republic. Is that when all the killing stopped? Oh, heavens no. That's when the killing surged, baby. We went wild and conquered the Latin League, the Samnites, the Etruscans. Woo! What a rush. Dad, Rome seems pretty barbaric. You're barbaric! Oh, I forgot to tell you about the time a prophet told Saturn his son would one day overthrow him. So Saturn literally ate his own son seconds after he was born. I don't want to see a picture. Here's a picture.
Dad!
I don't want to see a thing. Oh, man, this is gold.
Look at that!
That's messed up, man. Are we really this uncivilized?
Hey, hey!
If we were so uncivilized, would we use communal toilets where we all fart and poo together in one big stinky, steamy, dirty toilet room? Yeah, Dad. We would.
I want to be Roman. This is so weird.
You're weird. Sorry, you're not weird. I'm sure you're probably fine.
All right, so the First Punic War. We're throwing someone in the water, naval battles. I like the shields. We've got little Republican shields over there. Appreciate that. Montefortino helmets. I love that it's the correct type of, because bronze, in my opinion, would have looked like a dull golden color, not like you would imagine modern bronze being more on the brownish, reddish brown tone. I think this is more appropriate. So they did pretty good job, give them that. I just hope they don't repeat the myth that the Romans didn't have a navy before the First Punic War, because that's nonsense and I debunked it.
The Roman Republic, a nation that, since its foundation, had been stabbing necks all the way down the Italian peninsula. But this isn't the famous Roman Empire that ruled the known
I love the little cardiophylax, the little square. Sometimes it's a square, sometimes it's a round.
world. Not yet anyway. This is a relatively juvenile Rome, just a regional power. In 264 BC, the big daddy of the Western Mediterranean was Carthage. Let's rewind a bit. Carthage was founded in 814 BC, when some Phoenicians in Tyre had a mega surplus of goods and decided to export those goods
Correctly represented.
across the Mediterranean. They became the dominant trading power in the region, and to support their growing trade network, the Phoenicians established a number of colonies, one of which was Carthage.
They're absolutely right. The Carthaginians were of Levantine origin.
Therefore, Carthage began its life as a Phoenician trade colony, and the Carthaginians were actually Phoenicians. Or, if you're a Latin-speaking Roman, they were Punic, hence the name of the video. Over the centuries, Carthage gradually expanded and became the region's base of power.
They're going to ruffle some feathers with that statement.
Just like Rome, Carthage was a semi-democratic republic with its own senate and judiciary. But there were also some pretty hefty differences between the two. While Rome was big into farming and stabbing people in the neck, the Carthaginians, on the other hand, just like their Phoenician forefathers, had built their power through trade and navigating the waves.
Right.
They went here and there, selling ivory tusks, gold, and slaves. And as a result, they were rolling in it. Whenever they weren't busy swimming around in their copious hoards of money, in their spare time, they also possibly enjoyed sacrificing their children to Baal, the god of... Let me just check my notes. Yes. Plant fertility. Oh boy, these figs aren't looking too hot. Maybe if I throw my son into a burning pit of fire, they'll grow. Have you tried watering them, Dad? No, we'll try that second. As a result of all their trading, Carthage had emerged as one of the Mediterranean superpowers.
Yeah.
But wait, they said. Rome? What the heck is that? Well, I know it's a pretty obscure little country that you've probably never heard of. But this spunky young nation was about to upset the entire region's balance of power.
You know, it's interesting if you read the annals and the records. The Greeks initially, when Rome was just sort of starting, they considered them just another type of Etruscans. Eventually, though, as they grow in power and sophistication and political weight, military weight mostly, that's when the Greeks said, like, no, these are Romans, it's a different thing. But initially, that's an interesting fun fact.
Initially, the two sides enjoyed relatively friendly relations, and had even signed a couple treaties. But it was a relationship that was practically destined to turn sour. See, Rome had a thing where they liked to aggressively expand their boundaries, often viewing such expansion as a defensive act. Kinda like when you kill your neighbor, because you knew eventually they would have tried to kill you first. Meanwhile, Carthage was extremely protective of its wealthy trade network. So,
Hey, it's Sicily. Here we are, middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Everybody wants us.
if you put a very strategically important island between them, well, 2 + 2 = war. Tensions rose, and the two sides began viewing each other with increasing disdain. The hard-working Romans looked across the water at the money-hungry Carthaginians and said, "Look at those dishonest crooks. Bet they've never done an honest day's work in their lives." And the Carthaginians looked back and said, "Look at those simple-minded brutes. Bet they've never sacrificed a baby in their lives." Yeah. While war between the two superpowers seemed inevitable, the event that finally triggered it was a little unexpected. The whole thing began with a few simple mad lads
Messana.
on a wild night out. These mad lads are called the Mamertines. They were Italian mercenaries employed by the tyrant of Syracuse, here. But when he died, his successor said, "Sorry fellas, we don't need any big burly men with sharp sticks anymore. You can all go home." The Mamertines, as it turned out, didn't want to go home. So instead, they went to the nearby town of Messana and said, "Hey man, we are but poor little buff boys without a home. May we come in?" Aw, poor fellas. Sure thing. Just so long as you promise not to massacre all of us. We promise. The Mamertines then massacred all of them. Well, not all of them, just the men. And they stole their homes and families. Ha! This is my house now. This is my best dad ever mug now. And you guys are my new family. Son, wanna go play catch with your old papa? You're not my real dad! Ugh, teenagers. Am I right, dear? You're not my real husband. Ugh, I'm so trapped in this marriage. Then get out! No, Messana was now controlled by the Mamertines, and they began raiding up and down the Syracuse coastline. When the new ruler of Syracuse saw this,
It's actually, I am getting invested. That's why I'm not commenting as much. I probably should, as I usually do. In fact, people tell me I comment too much, and I stop pausing the video every 3 seconds. Well, there we go. Your wish has been granted. I'm really into this. I love the animations.
wasn't happy. The Syracusans began fighting back, and in response, the Mamertines said, "Oh crap, they're fighting back? What do we do? Quick, we'll convince the Carthaginians to come and save us." Oh no! We're in trouble, and we need a big, strong empire to come and rub our bellies. Why are you saying it like that? If I was a big, strong empire, I think I'd like to be seduced. See? It's working! The Carthaginians had long dreamed of controlling all of Sicily. They had been fighting Syracuse and their Greek influence on the island for centuries. And now, here was a great opportunity to get one over on them. So Carthage promptly answered
It's pretty well made.
the Mamertines' cry for help and sent a force to garrison Messana. As it turned out, however, some within the ranks of the Mamertines weren't too happy with the occupying Carthaginians, and they sent out a second cry for help to Rome. When it reached the Roman Senate, they were a little more hesitant. Going to help the Mamertines ran the risk of triggering an all-out war with Carthage, and they had only just finished conquering the Italian peninsula.
Man, imagine if they didn't. What language would I be speaking today? Right? Because, I mean, that is actually a fascinating thought.
So they were kind of tired. Plus, the Mamertines were all the way across the water. They had never made a leap like that before. So you would assume that to avoid any conflict with Carthage, the exhausted Romans would probably sit this one out. But you would assume wrong. Rome just couldn't resist a good chance for war. Why? Well, there's something you gotta understand about Rome.
Please.
See, as a republic, they were hell-bent on preventing any one man from ever gaining too much power. And so rather than having one leader, Rome had two, called consuls, who shared power. These consuls could also only serve for 1 year at a time before new consuls were elected. These measures to limit
It's really
the power
impressive, isn't it? I mean, of course, oversimplified discussion of the early magistrate and consuls in Rome, but obviously oversimplified channel. I mean, I can't use that against them, can I? But it is a fascinating thought if you think about it, how sort of ahead of their time they were when it comes to putting them in comparison with, for instance, Germanic tribes and Celtic tribes. The Greeks had also very particularly Athenians, because it's the ones that we have more records for, had also had a form of, in that case, pure democracy, and with Rome is a little different, but still, it's fascinating to think that they thought that way, right? Even with the terms, sounds so modern, and it's not the only thing, of course. Now, given, dear Oversimplified, I'm going to tell you this, you did a very good job with the walls, but these columns, these white columns, we got to paint them a little bit, mate. We need to paint them. I actually didn't pay attention to statues. Did they paint the statues?
powers of the consuls were noble, but had an interesting side effect. The consuls knew they had just 1 year to try and gain as much glory and prestige as possible, something that was very important in Roman society. And the best way of gaining glory and prestige? Military victory, of course. The Roman political system.
There is a very strong connection between the head of the military and also at the same time being political leaders. And at the end of the day, even when that starts to become a little bit less of a thing, generals or legati still had enormous political power. So there was always, you have to kind of imagine it as if today's president was also a veteran general. Look at it that way.
Basically ended up encouraging these consuls to go out and be as aggressive as your Italian grandmother when you don't eat all the spaghetti. And so the glory-seeking
Spaghetti.
consuls convinced the people to vote in favor of going to Messana. And in they went. Upon the arrival of the Romans, the Carthaginians in the city, amongst the confusion, were forced to leave. Now, in contrast to Roman aggression, the Carthaginian military had a slightly different philosophy. All right, kids, listen up. If you want to grow up to be Carthaginian military leaders, there's a few things you have to understand. If you fail to succeed on the battlefield, that's a crucifixion. Showing cowardice, that's a crucifixion. Hello, sir. What are you doing here? Aren't you meant to be in Messana? Yeah, but the Romans showed up. So you just left? Sure did. Oh, you better believe that's a crucifixion. The Roman consuls were awarded for victory, and therefore tended to be aggressive go-getters. By contrast, the Carthaginian generals were brutally punished for failure, and so they tended to be more cautious and restrained.
Right.
This dynamic is helpful for understanding some of the crazy things that happened during the Punic Wars. So, the Romans have crossed over to Messana, and now there was some red on the island. Hit that panic button. This turn of events was unacceptable to both Carthage and Syracuse, so the traditional enemies teamed up to kick the Romans off their
WTF? What the
island. They surrounded the city and said, "Hey, you jerks! This isn't your island! Come out of there at once!"
Okay, we're coming.
See, Phil, you just gotta speak
and
with
that's
authority.
troops.
That's what being an alpha male's all about. Hey, man. You brought your weapons and armor? No, I didn't mean... Oh, crap. Out the Roman legions came to engage the Carthaginians.
and they are all happy. I mean, you know, pitch battles where the Romans shine the most, so I mean, it does make sense.
And they sent them packing. With the Battle of Messana, whether intended or not, by going to help the Mamertines, the two sides had just slipped into an all-out war.
They must be doing some decent research to probably have some good advisors here. I appreciate that because oftentimes channels that do the little animations, what they do is they just read Wikipedia at you. Doesn't seem to be the case.
With the initial Roman victory, towns across Sicily, including Syracuse, began switching allegiance, because being a winner is more fun. But the Carthaginians weren't about to just give up that easily. In 262 BC, they began building up their forces at Agrigentum. So the Romans, being aggressive go-getters...
Interesting classical Latin pronunciation there.
...aggressively go-got them. The Romans immediately laid siege, hoping to starve out the Carthaginian garrison. However, because this was the first time Rome had been fighting outside the Italian peninsula, across the water, they struggled to supply their forces, and before long, the Romans were as starving as the Carthaginians they were besieging. They had to forage for food, leaving them open to ambush. And when Carthaginian reinforcements arrived, creating a double siege, things got really bad. Everybody starved each other for months until nobody could take it anymore, and they all finally came out for battle, which Rome won. Here's the report from the recent siege at Agrigentum, sir. We killed 30,000 while only suffering 7,000
The other way around.
losses?
Oh, he's
That's
gonna tell him.
amazing. We're the best. Yes, sir. Whoops, those are the wrong way around. What? We lost 30,000? We're the worst. But we won, right? Yes, sir. But we also got our asses kicked. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So are we the best or the worst?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
There you go. Excellent.
The Romans won at Agrigentum because they were aggressive go-getters, and they now began eyeing up the possibility of conquering the entire island. But they also suffered very heavy losses, and it was clear they couldn't sustain a campaign if they couldn't supply their troops. Here's the issue. Sicily was an island.
Yes.
Islands are surrounded by water.
Still is.
A strong navy would be vital for supplying
Let's
troops
see.
and winning the war. Here was Carthage's navy, and here was Rome's. I think you can see the problem. Historians debate just
Yeah.
how much naval experience Rome had at this point. Presumably, they must have had something to defend their shoreline. But whatever it was, it would have paled in comparison to the Carthaginian juggernaut.
Okay, so I appreciate that he doesn't straight on say that they had no navy whatsoever, which is false. I appreciate that he says it's debated, it is debated, but because of those treatises that he mentioned earlier on, that's when we get ideas and sort of hints when it comes to the presence of a at least decent navy when it comes to Rome, even before the beginning of the First Punic War. Now, given, I agree with him, that the Carthaginian navy would have been more experienced, more veteran, probably larger, more proficient, maybe even better vessels, but the Romans did have a navy, possibly even pirates of their own. Let me elaborate a little bit on that. We have all heard about the majesty of the Carthaginian fleets, particularly during the First and Second Punic War, and we have all heard about the Greek fleets, and even the fleets of Syracuse and the other sort of colonial Greek powers that then will sort of separate and even have some wars with Athens and whatnot. But what about the Roman military fleet? Well, when it comes to this topic, something you may have heard before, correct me if I'm wrong, is, oh no, the Romans they were great for like military, they were great when it comes to land forces, but navy, no, it was very weak. Or you may even have heard that they had no navy whatsoever prior the First Punic War against Carthage. Well, if you have heard this, then yes, you heard a myth. So let me debunk it. Rather than just being a myth, this is a little bit of an educated myth. And what I mean by that is that indeed there is a specific ancient source that tells us this, and it's Polybius. Now what he tells us is that specifically before the First Punic War, Rome did not have any fleet whatsoever. They didn't have warships, they had nothing. And in fact, it was only during the First Punic War that finally they built the first Roman fleet, which resulted in about 100 quinqueremes and 23 remes as the type of warships we're talking about, or vessels. Even though the description of the fleet is rather coherent for what they had specifically against Carthage, the part that is indeed a myth is the fact that they had no fleet before that. So was Polybius wrong? Did he not know how the situation was in fact before? And my opinion is no. I think he was just being hyperbolic in the sense that he really, really wanted to emphasize how amazing the Romans were and how amazing the Roman Republic was when it comes to how they put together a really strong fleet that could, in fact, compete with the otherwise extremely advanced and experienced Carthaginian fleet or Punic fleet. But what's really crazy about this is that in order to really debunk this idea that before the First Punic War the Romans had no military vessels in the Mediterranean Sea, you know who we are going to use as a source? Polybius. Literally, we're going to use Polybius to debunk Polybius. It's wonderful. What a day. But jokes aside, it's not just Polybius. We're going to refer to Plutarch. We're going to refer to Titus Livius, Dionysius of Halicarnassus. There are quite a few Roman writers and classical writers and Greek writers that tell us so much information that really debunks this, that at the end of the day, yes, we know for a fact the Romans absolutely had a navy before the First Punic War. Now, how powerful of a navy we're talking about? Probably not that impressive, but it still debunks the idea, the statement, the categorical statement, the Romans had no military fleet, no presence in the Mediterranean basin before the clash with the Punic powers. There are two dates that are really important when it comes to placing the beginning of the Roman fleet. One is 620 BC, which would be the founding of the city of Ostia, located at the mouth of the Tiber, traditionally attributed to the fourth king of Rome, Ancus Marcius. It had a small harbour and may have been one of the first, if not the first, of Rome colonies, specifically on the coast, and it is very probable that this is where the first vessels were created in Rome. But the one date that I want to use to kind of debunk this idea is 509 BC, and Polybius himself tells us about a very important treaty that was stipulated between the Roman Republic and the Carthaginian Republic. And in this treaty, the Carthaginians specifically told the Romans, you are not allowed to navigate with your vessels past the Phoenician settlement called this. That would be modern-day Gar el Mel, or the classical Rusuk Mona and Castradelia, modernly also known as Port Farina, at least when it comes to the name that it got during the French protectorate in the 1800s. Now, there is a little bit of scholarly debate when it comes to this specific Carthaginian treaty. Some scholars say maybe this was a fabrication. I personally don't believe that, but it is indeed possible this wasn't just a treaty concerning the Romans, but also more extensively the Etruscans too. With that being said, what would it matter to the Carthaginians and the Carthaginian Republic, why would they tell the Romans, oh, don't you dare go past this specific line, which is in modern-day Tunisia, with your vessels if these are not war vessels? If they have zero fleet at this point in 509 BC, why would they even care? To me, it kind of tells us that they perceived the Roman navy as a possible threat. Clearly, not as advanced as their navy, but it's interesting because this treaty was even having some clauses. For instance, you're not allowed to go past this line unless it's the weather that pushes your vessels there, or unless you are retreating from enemies during a conflict or a naval battle. So this would be a first indicator that the Romans did have a fleet. Of course, it's a little interpretative, we can't be 100% sure, but we can be a lot more sure when we reach the 4th century BC, because by now, something really interesting happens. In 396 BC, both Titus Livius and Diodorus Siculus tell us that the Romans conquer the Etruscan city of Veii, which would be modern-day Veio, situated about 16 kilometers or 9.9 miles northwest of Rome. This was an important Etruscan center. So when the Romans do succeed with their siege and they take the city, they decide, hey, we need to thank the gods, specifically the god Apollo. So what do? Well, they take 1/10 of the booty, the loot that they captured from the city, and they decide we need to take it to Delphi. Now, how do you reach Delphi? Well, these authors, the ancient sources, tell us that the Romans use specifically a long ship, in Latin navis longa, which was a war vessel. This has been interpreted as being most likely a type of ship which was pretty large, and it had 50 oars, 25 per side, in one line. So, not a quinque remis, just to be specific. Therefore, telling us that already at this time the Romans were well equipped to go around both the Mediterranean and the Tyrrhenian Sea. Last but not least, we have mentions of Roman piracy. I know, it kind of sounds strange, but here is how that went forth. In 338 BC, the Romans managed to conquer another very important town, which is the town of Antium, modern-day Anzio in Italian. Now, this city belonged to a people called the Volsci, who are an Italic people who, even though they got conquered, still remain part of the fabric of the Roman people, to the point that it is believed that even the first emperor, Octavianus Augustus, may have had some Volscian ancestry. But that's beyond the point here. The reason why it's important that in 338 BC the Romans conquered the city is because this city was very famous, should we say infamous, for its piracy. So basically they had a very well established fleet of pirate ships. And of course, once the Romans take the city, they take the entire fleet. And that's when most likely Roman piracy begins. And in fact, this piracy is mentioned by the Greeks, occasionally clashing with the Romans. But most importantly, and that's really the fun fact in here, and once again thanks to Dr. Calenstrelli for pointing this one out to me, even Alexander the Great at times complained about Roman piracy, which kind of underlines again that yes, the Romans were in fact familiar with sea vessels, warships, and both with their piracy and their military ships absolutely had at least a decent fleet even before the First Punic War.
And so Rome had to figure out exactly what to do about all this water.
Come on, men. We're not gonna let some pansy candy-ass water get in the way of our glorious victory against Carthage. Charge! Tell my kids I love them.
We're gonna need a bigger boat. What's a boat?
I don't know.
If the Romans wanted to win this war and obtain Sicily, there was only
Again, for comedic purposes, it's really funny, but the Romans absolutely had warships.
one thing for them to do. I guess we're just gonna have to go ahead and build ourselves a war fleet, aren't we? From scratch? From scratch.
Not from scratch.
Well, we don't even know how. Never mind how to fight with one. Don't worry, Hank. We're up to the challenge. Come on, guys. We're Romans, and Romans aren't afraid of anything. And so, the Romans worked long and hard trying to figure out how on earth you actually build the latest style of warship. In the end, they had a bit of luck on their side.
The
A
crash,
Carthaginian quinquereme ended up accidentally grounding on Italians.
This is what they say on Wikipedia, so in this case it does make me feel like they read that, but then again, maybe not. Maybe they actually looked into the detailed explanation on this.
Soil. The Romans found it and copied the design. While the new fleet was being built, the Romans trained rowers on land. And would you believe it? The Romans put together a full fighting fleet of 120 warships in just 2 months. A staggering feat. Now, I know what you're thinking, but oversimplified. If the Romans can build a war fleet from scratch in 2 months, then why does it take you half a year to make a video? Well, my valued subscriber, I think you should shut up. What the heck? How on earth did the Romans learn how to build a war fleet? This shouldn't be happening. From what I hear, they copied the design from us, sir. Well, how on earth did they get the blueprint, Carl? I don't know, sir. But I'll tell you what. If you're worried about people stealing your data, no. And
yeah, that's pretty good. Very smooth connection to the sponsor. I'll give him that. Anyways, as you know, I don't want to react to the entire thing. So the video continues at minute 17:32. And if you want to finish watching it, do that so that we can give him, the like and the view that they deserve as the actual creator of the video. And in general, I think the part that I really wanted to see was the section about Rome's navy, which I disagreed with, but regardless, phenomenal. I loved it. It was really funny, very funny channel. And apart from that, I'd say they did a very good job. So it was interesting, very entertaining, and I hope that you enjoyed it too. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for my next daily upload. Thank you. Bye.